The keto diet is traditionally lambasted by most mainstream medical outlets as being too restrictive and too unscientific. But for people with Hashimoto's and other autoimmune conditions, it might be the thing you need to reduce inflammation, stabilize your fuel levels, and start seeing improvements in your weight, cognition, sleep, and energy levels. So if you've done your research and have decided that the keto diet might be a good fit for you, how do you get started? Well, in today's video, we are going to give you actionable steps to get started on your keto journey while also making the necessary adjustments you need for your thyroid condition. And if you're new here, or if you're returning and haven't done so already, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also ring the bell. I post videos every single Thursday, and that'll let you know when new content goes live. My name is Dr. Brad Bodel, and I specialize in helping women with Hashimoto's and low thyroid to lose weight and improve their energy naturally. And one of the tricky things about these videos is I always want to provide you guys with enough information that you can understand the concepts. That way, when you make changes and things don't go according to plan, which will happen, you're able to then reroute and get back on track. However, I also don't want to overload you guys where the waters become so muddied, it's hard to get started in the first place. But today's video is about taking action. And if there are any concepts that you feel are a little thin, you can always leave me a question in the comments box below or send me a DM on social media. But to get started, let's really quickly define what the ketogenic diet is. The ketogenic diet is any nutritional strategy that restricts dietary carbohydrates to the point where your body stops relying on dietary intake for fuel and instead it switches to utilizing stored fuel, primarily in the forms of glycogen and body fat. To be able to make that switch, the first thing you need to do when starting out on your ketogenic diet is reduce your daily carb intake to less than 20 net grams of carbohydrates. Now I know I've spoke before about how people can have higher amounts of carb intake and still be in nutritional ketosis. But there's a bit of a sliding scale here, and the more chronic some of your health issues are, it's likely the more strict you need to be. But I realize for someone to be able to restrict their carbohydrates, they first need to know what foods contain carbohydrates, and that's not something that everybody knows. In general, the majority of carbohydrates come from plant sources. So that's going to include all of your grains and grain products, things like flours, breads, cookies, and cereals. But it also includes things like fruits, vegetables, and nuts and seeds. And this is where I think a lot of the disconnect comes into play for keto. We've been told for so long that a healthy diet relies on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains that it can be hard to imagine giving some of these things up. And if your diet already revolves around these foods and you're doing well, then I'm not necessarily suggesting that you change. But if you are struggling and you're looking for different options, I want you to know that reducing these foods is not unhealthy and it's likely advantageous. Even so, a common question that I'll get asked is, with the reduction of these plant-based foods, how are we going to get our fiber? Now, here's the thing about fiber. Fiber can be great for some people and not so great for other people. It's just not the panacea that we've been led to believe. But if you seem to do better with a higher fiber diet, that's great. The ketogenic diet allows for that, and all you have to do is choose higher fiber vegetables and avoid the more starchy ones. However, if you don't do well with fiber and it causes GI issues for you, don't sweat it. Likely reducing your carb intake to under 20 net will be relatively easy for you. In either scenario, pay special attention to your carb intake, and in the beginning, use an app to help you track. Net carbs are calculated by taking the total amount of carbohydrates in a food and subtracting the fiber. So all you have to do is take all of the carbohydrates you eat in a particular day, remove the fiber, and if you're under 20 grams, then you're golden. But keep in mind that this kind of calculation works for whole foods only. If we start dipping our toe into some of the processed keto products out there, there's a lot of things that go on where fiber is added and the numbers are manipulated where net carbs don't tend to be so effective. So be careful in those scenarios. But as long as you're sticking to whole foods and confirming that you're under 20 net grams of carbohydrates per day, this will put you in ketosis. You don't need to use a urine strip or prick your finger to confirm that you're producing ketone bodies. In the beginning, I think this overcomplicates the process and doesn't necessarily add to the clinical benefits. But if we're going to dramatically reduce our carbohydrate intake, we have to be aware that for most people, this is going to take a huge chunk out of their daily caloric intake, and we have to find a way to compensate for that. So our next step on getting started with keto is increasing our protein intake. Protein has long had a stigma for being unhealthy, and even in certain parts of the keto world, people are worried that overconsumption of protein may actually lead to increased blood glucose levels and stop them from being in nutritional ketosis. But I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. We should not fear protein, and in fact, we should prioritize it to allow us to maintain a healthy caloric intake and also support good metabolic function. The recommendations for the amount of protein that you should actually be getting on a low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet vary widely. And as we've discussed before, that usually means there's no one magic number that we should all be trying to hit. However, if you're following the standard recommendation that the amount of protein you should be eating at a meal should be smaller than the palm of your hand, you're missing it. And you're likely going to struggle as you transition into a ketogenic style of eating. In general, I recommend that you eat 1.5 grams of protein for every kilogram of body mass. But if that seems too hard, I would start with 100 grams of protein per day and adjusting from there. And by the way, these are both minimum values that we want you to be able to hit. If you're still hungry or feel like your energy is a bit low, then increase your protein intake. But don't avoid doing so because you're fearful it'll kick you out of ketosis or stall your progress. But the main take-home point is this. As you restrict your carbohydrates, help to compensate for that by targeting adequate protein intake. Now, our third step for getting started with keto is getting our fat intake right. And there's a couple things that we have to be cautious about here, especially if we have Hashimoto's. Most ketogenic diets heavily promote the intake of fat, from things like putting butter in your coffee to making fat bomb snacks. But to me, the ketogenic diet is not about massive fat intake, and instead, it's about the restriction of carbohydrates. So if you keep things simple in the beginning, as we suggested before, and consume a diet that is rich in animal products and use fats for your cooking, you'll likely do great. The way that we can get into trouble with fat is by adding it at every little turn to every single meal. Especially in the beginning, if we have a significant amount of body fat that we want to lose, the advantage of the ketogenic diet is we want to tap into it, break it down, and use that as our fuel source. Sure, some people will do better with a higher fat diet due to the way it affects their energy and their satiety levels, but in general, we want to use fat as a lever based on our needs, not as a staple. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is most of the time, people are getting fat for their ketogenic diets through dairy products. And while that may be okay for a certain percentage of the population, people with Hashimoto's and thyroid issues do have a higher likelihood of having issues with dairy intake. So even though dairy fits the keto macros, people with Hashimoto's should avoid it due to the fact that it can increase autoimmune activity and contribute to an increase in inflammation. So when it comes to a ketogenic approach, certainly don't be afraid of fat, but don't artificially add it to everything. And be aware that certain fats can cause issues for people with thyroid problems. But hopefully everything is making sense, and as I said before, if you have any questions, leave them for me in the comments box below, and also let me know what you think about this kind of approach to the ketogenic diet. But our last step for getting started with keto is electrolytes, and this is a key aspect that many people forget. Now, when I talk about electrolytes, some of the things that I'm thinking of are things like sodium, potassium, chloride, and magnesium. And when we start to drop our carbohydrate intake, what it does is it also drops the hormone insulin. Now, this is really great for us to be able to make that metabolic switch to burning fuels that are stored on our body, but it also has some other downstream effects. One of the big ones is that insulin helps to regulate our electrolytes. And as insulin drops, we tend to see people losing a lot of their salts through urination. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, this is believed to be one of the big contributing factors to many of the symptoms that people associate with the keto flu. So if we're going to be losing more electrolytes, and in the beginning that can make us feel more lethargic, more lightheaded, dizzy, a little nauseous, we want to be able to replace those in a manner that helps us to make that transition much easier. A good recommendation is slowly working up to taking 4 to 6 grams of sodium per day in combination with 3 to 4 grams of potassium and 100 to 800 milligrams of magnesium. That said, one of the things that we need to be aware of is that sodium is a trigger for some people with autoimmunity. And if that's the case, oftentimes adding the potassium to it can offset it, but if you're continuing to have issues, just reduce the amount of sodium you're taking in and increasing the amount of potassium. So to wrap it all up, to be successful in getting started with keto, you need to reduce your carbohydrates to less than 20 net grams per day, which might be a little less than you anticipated. You want to increase your protein to at least 100 grams per day, which might be a little bit more than you anticipated. And you want to modulate your fat intake depending on your needs. Some people will do better with more, some people will do better with less, but you don't necessarily need to be taking in a huge amount to be able to achieve nutritional ketosis. Lastly, make sure you're adding in electrolytes because so many people struggle in the beginning as they lose more electrolytes and they don't necessarily add in the amount that they need. If you like this video but want to keep learning, make sure you grab my new free download, which is Electrolytes for Hashimoto's and Keto. That way you can nail your electrolytes, feel your best with an easy at-home recipe. Also, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, all you have to do is send me an email at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com and I can get you all the information you need to be able to set up a free one-on-one consultation to see if we would be a good fit to work together. But that's all for today. I hope you guys liked today's video and I hope it gave you some really actionable steps that you can start using right away. Don't forget to do all the good things, like, subscribe, share it with a friend, leave me a comment if you have any questions. I hope you guys are having an outstanding week and a great start to your new year. My name is Dr. Brad Bodel and I'll see you guys next Thursday.